It looks pretty bad to say that you have a permanent illegal immigrant underclass that's picking up your trash for pennies. But if you take the exact same situation and say you have a recycling program that's combating racism and xenophobia, then suddenly that sounds like a positive thing. That's really what Colombian progressivism really is. Let's explore. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Propaganda Basement, episode 13. Let's hope I'm not excessively unlucky with recording this one. Episode 13 of season 5. Once again, just like in the previous episode, there is one of these papers that starts straight up with a commercial. I mean, it's just particularly annoying. Right, the first page is in fact the third page, because the first one is a huge commercial to Apple in this case. In previous case, it was commercial to, I think, food or whatever. Anyway, so El Esperador, September 27th, 2024. At that time, there were several recurring themes. One was the pseudo-constitutional crisis, which turns out it wasn't that constitutional crisis. It was mostly economic problems. Then there was the finishing up of one of the many negotiations with some of these tribes whose lands have been cartel territory, and now they're trying to get back, and some of them don't have paperwork for it, and the state is trying to legalize their status there. It's part of the real mission of the Ministry for National Reconciliation. Of course, it's been dressed up. I mean, I'm pretty sure some of the officialdom in the Colombian government is very happy with the defeat of progressivism in other places, because now they suddenly no longer have to work that hard to dress their relatively simple things into progressive jargon, but nevertheless. And there's also some other recurring themes, such as this one is it looks not really that important, but it's very important. The difficult moment for clothing industry and the shoes industry in Colombia. It's the production and selling of this industry, of the fashion industry and of shoe industry, is in negative territory. It's mostly on the background of a diminution of consumption and contraction of demand overall, whatever. Yeah, this is a big deal, because and this is one of the aspects that the the Trump administration relied on when it pressured Colombia on getting some of its illegal immigrants back, because a lot of the textile products all over Latin America and portions of North America are actually made in Colombia. It's one of those situations where I can laugh at the Europeans in particular, who are like, well, who the hell makes clothing anymore? They're all made in China. Well, actually, that's no longer the case, if it ever was. And, just because your clothes are all made in China, then that's a you problem. It's a your choice problem. Generally speaking, in fact, a lot of them are made in so many other places, Colombia being one of these highly important manufacturer. And, when they complain about a shrinking in demand, one should look at this in a context of, okay, then it's probably some economic turbulence is afoot. And lo and behold, a few months later, it becomes clear that there is some economic turbulence, more or less globally, and that's not by accident. If something so simple as clothing and shoes has a shrinking in demand, then that means there's there'll be dragons. Now, of course, I'm not particularly concerned. Okay, this one is particularly funny because all of this entire article is propaganda, like tourism in Bogota. How should I put it? If you want to do tourism in Colombia, there's one thing you don't do. You don't do tourism in Bogota. I mean, for politics and for learning all sorts of things about the country and about the people, so not just the politics, but also the people, for a sociological study, Bogota is awesome. If you want to have fun, if you want to do tourism, whether it's to learn the culture or to just go to party hard, effectively, for neither of these things, Bogota is just not the biggest place to do that. The attempt here at painting Bogota as a place where you can actually do some tourism is quite laudable. It's one of those situations where in propaganda we're like, okay, that's a bold strategy. Let's see how that works. It works out pretty well. And it also mentions that 3% of all employees in the city work in the tourism industry, which I straight up don't believe. I think that at least a portion of that is money laundering or something else, just recorded as tourism so it can launder some cash. I mean, seriously, I just straight up don't believe that 3% of all employees in Bogota work in tourism, because there's just, again, there's not much tourism to be made in the Colombian capital. Again, for other things like, and not just finding out politics and doing sociological studies, finding stuff. I mean, the whole city, as you can see in some of the footage, is like just a huge open market and a very well stocked market as well. I mean, it's not. I'm not disparaging the place. Quite the opposite. Like for instance, the this little screw from this little stick that I'm using to show you the newspapers from up close. I found it in Bogota because I had lost the original one. I have just no idea what happened to it. And I just woke up in Bogota. Oh my goodness, how the hell am I going to do footage like this? I need a screw, so I found it. You can find pretty much anything you want in Bogota. That includes firearms, drugs, pieces. You can even find, probably you can find a batea if you try hard enough. Definitely all sorts of weapons. Definitely any kind of electronic device that you can imagine. That includes antique stuff from the 1920s and all the way to the most modern stuff of anything, really. Um, all sorts of food, whatever you want. Anything you want, probably someone is selling somewhere in Bogota. You just need a huge pile of pesos and that's it. You'll find it. So no, there are attractive stuff, but trying to paint the capital as a place for tourism and it's the kind of propaganda that is like, well, okay, you've been trying too hard. I'm just saying. Okay, so now let's get to my favorite topic, which is this one, right? Recycling and the responsibility of the society with the value of this labor, right? And it's a long article. Obviously, we're not going to read it because translating this would take me forever. Right, the migration enriched the recycling project, right? From and there you go. So it's U.S. funded, at least in part. And she mentions, right, Paola Weiss, the assistant from the humanitarian assistance program at the Embassy of the United States in Colombia. She has signaled that there is a persistent stigmatization and xenophobia against those who recycle and have a migrant background, whatever. Now, of course, she would mention things like that, but the reality is even grimmer than that. You see, there is a neighbor of Colombia named Venezuela, and a lot of people in Venezuela found themselves in a communist regime the old-fashioned way, and the old-fashioned way communism means you starve to death. It's really that simple. And one way to avoid starving to death is leaving and going where pretty much anywhere where there is no communism and they are willing to let you in. Well, as it turns out, the closest place one can do that from Venezuela is Colombia. Colombia is not particularly wealthy, but at the very least it's not a communist country, and if you're handyman enough, you can actually build yourself a house, and if you manage to stay out off the radar for a while, suddenly you can appropriate that land for yourself, especially if it's built on land that is uncontested. You can still do that. That's the beauty of the new world, something that is very difficult to achieve in Europe, but can definitely be done in the new world, or at least some portions of the new world. And most of those people, how do they make a living? Well, some of them, especially the least educated of them, or who are in various, what do they call it, politically exposed situations, well, some of them do end up working either on the more dignified side of this recycling grift, or yes, on the less dignified side of the recycling grift. And to keep the whole recycling grift somewhat profitable, ideally, most or at least a significant minority of the employees is preferable that they be illegal immigrants or paid under the table. Problem is that paying under the table is, of course, widely practiced in Colombia, just like in pretty much any other country. Yes, that includes those that insist that it doesn't happen. But the thing is that paying under the table, it may not be enough to hire a local, but it's definitely enough to hire a Venezuelan whose options are, of course, less stellar. So yeah, but again, if you say that we in Colombia have a permanent underclass of illegal immigrants who just take our trash, that sounds terrible. But if you put it like this, right, we're combating xenophobia and racism, or whatever they call it here, stigmatization and xenophobia, then suddenly it just no longer looks and sounds and feels like slave labor, even though, at least in part, that's really what it is. So there's that. And then there is a lot of discussion, and we'll get back to this topic probably one or next episode maybe. I don't. There's a recurring theme, and this hasn't been over. It's still recurring at the moment of this recording, several months later, and will likely be a topic when this hits YouTube as well. Not the fiscal aspect, but the whole topic of the rule of law. In some aspects, when I was reading these newspapers, it felt like I was reading the newspapers from Romania from, I guess, 2011 or 2010 or even 2007. An incessant obsession with proceduralism, and yes, but it's not fully procedurally correct, and all sorts of meaningless lawfare and meaningless conversations about just how the rule of law should look like. Now, I'm not saying that it is the whole topic is illegitimate. No, it's not. But at some point, there is too much of it. Like like the Trump administration is finding out, right? You get stopped by whatever random judge who just happens to have ideas. Well, it's a very similar thing in Colombia. Again, I don't like the current president of Colombia at all, but he was accused of creating a fiscal dictatorship just because he changed a portion of the fiscal code for a short while via an executive order, which is something that actually happens quite routinely in Europe. You can change, either introduce or remove or suspend a certain tax, and then at some point, usually several months later, that executive order ends up in the parliament, and then the parliament can reject your measure or whatnot. But apparently in Colombia, very few presidents, very few heads of the executive have used this power. So the first time it was used to introduce a new, of course, a left-wing president tried to introduce a new tax, obviously. He was attacked as trying to create a fiscal dictatorship, which also goes to tell you just how right-wing Colombia generally is. I mean, the accusation itself is significantly disproportionate, dare I say, over the target, um, compared to what could happen and could have happened in other places, and compared to generally to the deed itself, right? Um, a certain introduction, certain amendment to the fiscal code by the officialdom with the most democratic legitimacy, right? The president is elected directly in Colombia. Probably not a big deal. Yeah, sure, not entirely procedural, but so what? In any event, that will be pretty much it with this one. Let's move to the next one, which is even funnier. Yeah, so this one is, of course, El Esperador, being a more leftish paper, was keeping the issue of Israel on the front page more. Not that it helped, but whatever. So, El Esperador, September 28th, 2024. Of course, we're not going to talk about Israel because there's plenty of sources to that. There you go. So this is the former president, Mr. Santos. He was the one trying to stop the current president from abolishing the agreement with FARC and prevent getting the country back into trouble. And again, most of this debate was occurring in late September and most of the October. As you can see, huge article about the judicial affairs. Again, at some point I was feeling that I was reading the newspapers from Romania in 2007 or so. There's an excessive obsession. I'm not saying it's illegitimate again, but I am saying that it's too much focus. And there we go. This is a blast from the past. That's what I was looking for. Notice, please. Right? So the Allies, USAID, and FUPAD, social dialogues, and it's all about, it's mostly feminism, right? We are community resilience and security of the citizens for communities most affected by violence. And as you'll notice, there are mostly, like on this part, like 0 men, even though 98% of those heavily affected by violence have been men. Now, to be fair, this whole page is not fully illegitimate because there is also a correct focus, although it should be more, but whatever. At least they do mention the police, now not these two guys in particular, but the police in general. Colombia is a very interesting place. It's probably, well, not the only place on earth, definitely, but there is some focus on the police. We'll get back to more police propaganda, and because, well, the police is one of the institutions that is more or less to be praised for having helped to end the civil war that's been plaguing the country for so long. But generally speaking, even when they somewhat get closer to the truth, most of this remains effectively genderist propaganda, far left propaganda, the most disgusting form of it, and trying essentially to pollute the message about who and how who brought the peace in Colombia and how it was brought by basically making everything about the people who are least affected, least involved in both the positive and the negative side of it. That would be women. Okay, so that's one of the many reasons why eventually there will be, and even in Colombia, again, Colombians have been a little bit more tolerant to these kinds of narratives than Ecuadorians, but even in Colombia, eventually there will be a backlash on this because everyone is getting sick and tired of this shit, and for obvious good reasons. All right, so this is the part where I think it's the most extreme version of propaganda that you can find. This particular author is relatively well known for writing things that are not just provocative, but just straight up from the portion of the human mind, as in, why did you have to post that? Why? Right, so cosmopolitan human rights. Love for one's country is stronger than love for humanity. Yes, that's how it should be, right? We have many examples of the capacity of patriotism to subdue and even nullify the most vigorous cosmopolitan ideals. The Enlightenment was a great universalist movement, but in the 19th century it was overwhelmed by the Romantics who preferred to exalt a national sentiment. Marxism was humanist and transnational, but the Communist Revolution turned it into a national flag. The socialist parties at the beginning of the 20th century could have declared a general strike to stop the First World War, but they preferred to embrace the flags of their countries and go to the battlefields. Even liberal philosophy, which gave Adam Smith so much hope for the capacity of trade to sow tolerance among peoples, was a dream subjugated by the patriotic spirit. Something similar, although less dramatic, occurs with human rights. Their humanist vocation, beyond the distinction of groups and nations, has been dampened by the political dynamics within countries, which absorb almost everything and prevent us from seeing the broader picture of human suffering. This is what happens in Latin America, where the culture of human rights has been shaped by struggles of its militants against the prevailing political forces opposed to those of the despot. There is something necessary and even inevitable in this, and I have no doubt that these struggles have been heroic and must continue. However, by being too enmeshed in the national sphere, they leave out a number of violations of human rights originating in supranational spheres, such as the ravages that global warming is causing, oh no, especially among the poorest, or mass migrations for which the protection offered by local institutions is insufficient. Who cares? The defense of the Amazon, for example, is meager when limited to campaigns within the 9 countries concerned, with Brazil, Peru, and Colombia having the most territory with 60, 13, and 10% respectively. Between 2000 and 2013, the Amazon lost 4.7% of its forests. If we do not do something different from what we've been doing, the Amazon could lose 27%, around 85.4 million hectares of forests by 2030. That something different is the recognition by the Amazonian countries, starting with Brazil, of international environmental law and its regional and global institutions. But the objective will not be achieved without the transnational unity of environmental struggles and without their capacity to force governments to submit to those common rules. Yeah, you and what army? The fight for international law and the strengthening of its global institutions should be central to the agenda of organizations working for human rights. Much of this is being done today and has even grown in recent years, but my impression is that even more needs to be done. We must insist more on the cosmopolitan and humanist vocation of these struggles and prevent them from being devoured by patriotic passions. You guys need to be thrown off of helicopters, seriously. The rise of nationalism is, as Isaiah Berlin says, the strongest impulse that has animated almost all the states on the planet since the beginning of the 20th century. But this passion, it must be recognized, is almost never in tune with the interests of humanity. In this regard, it is always good to remember what Montesquieu said, that if something is useful for my country but harmful for humanity, I consider it a crime, and I consider that if something is said by Montesquieu should be presumed as degenerate until proven otherwise. Oh, sorry, he didn't say that. I said that. Okay, so this is the kind of extremist propaganda that is very much tolerated in Latin America in a way that, and it doesn't attract the necessary backlash. It doesn't attract the necessary reaction. Now, to be fair, this is the kind of setup that you wouldn't think of in other places. Like I don't think I recorded because it was a little bit haram to record there, but you'll have to trust me on that. I went into a huge bookstore in Medellin, I think it was, not in Bogota. Anyway, but it was in Colombia. To look for books, obviously. And the political section was absolutely fascinating. So, of course, you had the book written by a certain Austrian painter, and you had the Communist Manifesto, of course, Das Kapital, all of that, both in the original German and translated into Spanish. And then you had more contemporary authors, everything from the looniest far righters to the looniest helicopterable commies, and almost everything you can imagine in between. So from that perspective, the spectrum of acceptable political thought in public is significantly wider, at least in Colombia, than it is in most of Europe. Let's put it this way, right? In most of Europe, in fact, some of the books sold in that bookstore in Medellin would be straight up illegal. And I don't mean the book written by a certain Austrian painter. No, I mean some of those from the contemporary thinkers. I mean, there was a certain book written by a kid, effectively. I mean, the guy is born in like 98 or something, where he was effectively arguing that certain populations of Colombia are subhumans. And right next to him, there was a response by another author, a separate book about why the first guy is wrong. Right? So that kind of diversity of opinions is very difficult to find on most of the planet, but it is found in Colombia. With that said, this is not the case in this newspaper, right? In this newspaper, you have mostly or exclusively far leftist crap, and that is my problem with this particular. So you got far left feminism, more anti-Elon Musk propaganda, and of course, something about how AI is bad, although for the entirely wrong reasons, but whatever. So it's the opinion section is entirely left wing, which is not the case in other places in Colombia. But this newspaper is like that, and that is concerning to me because, well, if a place of power, be it a newspaper or whatever, doesn't have 50% right wing in it, at least 50%, then it is a huge problem. Ideally, the best newspaper is 120% right wing, obviously. Nothing for the left is a very good policy. Still, the fact that someone can write crap like this, the kind of crap that I just read, shows me that not enough is being done to quash this extremist opinion. And I mean it globally as well, right? Because at some point we really need to start asking these questions and start affirming that what human rights is an opinion, and why exactly should opinions be awarded some sort of reverential status, right? Because that's that's what's really about now these days, right? All sorts of these weirdos and crap people. They're like, oh my goodness, but this violates human rights. What exactly is human rights? It's an opinion of a left-wing activist. Why exactly should opinions of left-wing activists be awarded any sort of consideration of any kind, really? I mean, why shouldn't we presume? I mean, whenever I hear human rights these days, I just roll my eyes and presume illegitimate nonsense. And so far, I have yet to find an instance where I was wrong. I'm sure I'll find one eventually. But so far, I have yet to find an instance where I was wrong to consider that the utterance of human rights in public is anything but illegitimate nonsense. Because really, I mean, force governments to submit to the global authority on the international environmental law. What the hell is that? Who cares? Really? I mean, you and what army? Colombia and Peru, militarily speaking, are absolutely zero compared to Brazil, right? And we actually do have an article in one of these papers. We'll get to it, I suppose, next episode or 2 episodes from now, whatever, where Colombia effectively remained without a portion of the army due to economic situation. So, how exactly are you going to press the much bigger neighbor Brazil to submit to your extremist and environmentalist ideas, right? Anti-capitalist and whatnot. How exactly you and what army? And at some point, we're gonna have to have that conversation, even though it's not going to be a nice type of conversation. Anyway, one more thing. Here's another one that is also commercials at first, and then this time around is state commercial. That's rare. I mean, I don't think I have another example like this. So El Esperador, September the 30th, 2024, which just happens to be a day of remembrance about the police. Now, to be fair, and again, this is one of those situations where Colombia is really special, not necessarily in a positive way, but also not necessarily weird or in a negative way as either. But I mean, this kind of pro-police propaganda would never fly in most other places on earth, but it does fly in Colombia because it's one of the few places where, within living memory, police officers have actually put quite literally their lives on the line, and a lot of them did die in an attempt to flatten the cartels, and actually succeeded. So it wasn't just an attempt, it actually worked, right? Although it cost quite a few human lives and police lives, it did work. That's what makes this place that you're looking at, the police museum, uh, you know, I got invited in effectively. I mean, the police has active outreach activities to get people in to learn more about the Colombian police, learn more about these activities. It's fascinating, to be quite honest. Of course, I'll get into more details, or maybe I have no idea when I'm publishing this, but in the series dedicated to Latin America, I'll get into more details. But it's a very special situation, and it's again one type of propaganda that it would be quite a challenge, even for someone highly experienced in propaganda, to do something, to pull off something like this, almost anywhere else, really. I mean, imagine doing this, I don't know, in Atlanta, in the US, right? Have a pro-police museum, right? Made out of the taxpayers' dollars again, right? Or anywhere in Europe, really. I mean, in West Europe, it would be perceived as oppressive and racist, and in East Europe, it would be perceived as an insult because, well, most police officers are upholding the stereotype that they've inherited since the days of the communist regimes, namely that most police officers are dumb, because they are. So there's that, right? The militia stereotype just didn't die. So being able to do this, have this pro-police type of propaganda, is something that I'm pretty sure fans of a more authoritarian regime are looking at, and they're thinking that, okay, maybe we can do this in our country as well. We'll see if it's possible. I'm pretty sure there are a few authoritarian regimes that are thinking about it, but really, it's something that so far only Colombia has been able to achieve. Right. Again, keep in mind this is September 2024. There you go, X and or the absolute freedom of speech, and effectively you have an editor that basically says, okay, this pretty much borks Mrs. Harris in a similar way that Mrs. Clinton got borked in 2016. Again, September 30th, right? So more than 6 weeks, or 5 or 6 weeks before the US election. Once again, I'm just going to make the same point that I made a few episodes ago. Just tells you how shit the media in English is, if this less than $1.50 literally 50 cents. I mean, 2,200 pesos, that's about 50 cents. And this 50-cent newspaper managed to get it right, whereas the Democrat media complex in English, worth billions and billions and billions of dollars, was incapable of getting this right. So, that's what I'm saying. I mean, at least when it comes to certain types of propaganda, there is a lot of value in studying Colombian propaganda. And although there's nothing new that we can learn, we can definitely get some new tips and tricks, right? I guess that would be one way of phrasing it. All right, that will be enough for now. We'll be back with more green propaganda. Again, there's a lot of it still left in the next episode. Thanks a lot for watching. If you like this kind of content, please do consider becoming a member on members.freedomalternative.com, because we can't do it without your financial support. And I'll see you around. Cheers.